Good morning. All right, just get organized. It's extraordinary. It's to be at this historic Congress. I'm amazed to be here speaking to all of you about distribution. It feels like a little bit of a dream come true for someone who's been working in distribution for so long. And I'm so grateful, to all of you in Color Congress, to Sahar, to Sonia, to Andrea. Thank you to the Gathering Spot for being such good hosts for us. This is a space like no other that I've been in. So I'm going to just start with a very brief background of myself so you know where I'm speaking from. I'm a producer and I'm a distributor. I believe that every act of filmmaking is an act of community. I've spent 20 years producing American independent feature films about communities who I didn't see enough of on screen. As part of a company called dGenerate Films, I've spent 15 years acquiring and releasing uncensored independent films from mainland China and now Hong Kong to audiences in North America. So we have painstakingly acquired, now we have over 80 films, 80, most of them documentaries. Thank you. And we've done the work, we've done the hard work to find audiences and space for those films in North America. So doing this producing and distribution work in tandem has given me the opportunity to develop what I call an outsider-insider perspective. I greatly value that perspective. That has given me a full picture of the supply chain of the filmmaking process. And it's from this place where I stand that I co-founded Distribution Advocates very recently. We are 5 principal members: Avril Speaks, Abby Sun, Carlos Gutierrez, and Amy Hobby. Our work would not be possible without the support of Color Congress, the Perspective Fund, and Ford Foundation. So, how did we get here? We are at a unique moment in our field where most everyone is aware that there is a distribution crisis. The awareness is new, the crisis is not. 25 years ago, I joined the film business because I had a desire to create culture, to tell stories, and above all, to create change. But I learned that the films that I wanted to see as an audience member, it's not that those films weren't being made, those films weren't being distributed. That's even more true today. I learned how to distribute films because I chose from the very beginning to make films about diverse communities. And I pay tribute to the Asian American woman who showed me the way, who showed me what was possible. Lonnie Ding was my first film teacher. Folks like Ria Tajiri, organizations like Third World Newsreel, they inspired me to break new ground because they broke new ground. In the early 2000s, the business did not believe there was interest or audience in Asian American stories. I produced 3 Asian American feature films during that time. The first one sold in multiple territories outside the US without a sales agent. In the US, the only offer we got was no money up front and a contract for 50 years. So that forced us to find another path. We created a hybrid model of distribution that led to revenue, that led to more sales. So more so than producing that first film, it was distributing that first film that was my film school. I learned how the system worked. I learned where we could find audiences. I learned where we could make revenue. I learned by doing the work, and I'm still learning. So it was this knowledge of distributing Asian American cinema, that the films that I produce, that led me to know that there was a possibility for the market when I encountered uncensored movies coming out of China. These were films made in a space where there is no opportunity for distribution. So think about that. These filmmakers made these films in spite of the fact they knew that there was no domestic market for their films. They knew that if they made the film, no one in their country could see it. So I will tell you, there was so much creative freedom in those films. If you divorce your filmmaking completely from the marketplace, think about what you would do in your own filmmaking practice. Watching those films for the past 15 years has transformed my understanding of what documentary is. So I'm both an idealist and a pragmatist, but on a day-to-day level, my pragmatism always wins out. So this talk is my call to arms to use our resources, our energy, our creativity, our talent, and our collective power to democratize the means of distribution. As we are doing with the means of production, as all of you are doing with the means of production, can we start to own the means of distribution? Can we start by putting the means of distribution in the hands of everyone in this room? I think we can. So why does this matter? Historically, who controls distribution controls the business of filmmaking. The films and stories that get distributed are the ones that get seen. The films that are distributed are the ones that make money. The stories and creators who make money, they are the ones who get more money to make their next work. Distribution determines what gets seen, and distribution determines what gets made and who gets to make it. So why now? We are in a supercharged version of the original distribution crisis of gatekeepers, except now there are fewer gatekeepers. Those gatekeepers are now making films. Many of them are no longer buying films. One distributor went from buying 25 films in 2019 to making 25 films in 2022 and buying none. We are living in the era of extreme vertical integration. And the business model of today, it is fueled by predatory pricing. The lower cost to consumers is passed on to the storytellers and to the creators. So except for a very elite few, storytellers are paying for corporations to gain market dominance. This has starved our options for financing and for distribution. For example, think about the funding that exists to develop documentary projects. You need written and visual materials to raise money. So most documentary development is self-financed. Think about who can afford that. Besides the very few grants that exist, many BIPOC filmmakers rely on development funding from the public media system. This is funding that asks filmmakers to sign away the first right of negotiation on their broadcast distribution. Giving away distribution rights in order to secure development financing, in order to raise production financing, is just one example of how our current system is a cycle of deprivation. So in the original crisis, the distributors were the gatekeepers. This new reality is different. The ground has shifted while the regulators looked away. Today, a company that is only a distributor is a company that is struggling. This is from the WGA. They have a department that just studies and makes policy recommendations. And they put out a recent report, which happy to send out to the Congress, that studied this current consolidation crisis that we're in. And this is a slide from their report. So the biggest distributors today have become production studios, they have become exhibitors, they own the entire supply chain from beginning to end, top to bottom. We exist in a landscape of vertically integrated Goliaths, fueled by venture capital and private equity. We are forced to rely on some of the biggest corporations in the world to distribute diverse nonfiction film. So this is not a level playing ground, this is a monopoly. And I love this quote from Carlos, one of our members, because it's a reminder of where the problem is. So before we go further, I just want to briefly define again what is distribution and what is exhibition. So distribution is the work to acquire content, engage and deliver the work to exhibitors, and draw audiences to watch it. Curation and marketing are the two biggest drivers of distributor success. Resources are overwhelmingly committed to marketing. They are battling for attention in an attention economy. We'll come back to this slide too. Let's see on that. Exhibition is the virtual or physical space where films are shown. And I just want to acknowledge that many of you here are examples of the interesting, the radical, the ground up work that is happening and that you are leading in exhibition. So to put it in terms of the kind of work I do, my work as a distributor, I am not an exhibitor. As a distributor, I find uncensored films being made in China somewhere. I get them out of China. I prepare them for the North American marketplace. I bring them to hundreds, if not thousands, of exhibitors. And it is my work to create an audience and then draw that audience to watch these films. So where does Distribution Advocates come in? So Distribution Advocates is a relatively new collective, coalition in formation, starting about a couple years ago in the pandemic. And we take our name and our inspiration from the patient advocate model. About 10 years ago, overnight, I had to leave the film business and I became a full-time caregiver for my twin sister. I want to recognize the caregivers in this room. Talk about a tough job. I had never been in a hospital before that moment. And I learned what a patient advocate does. A patient advocate guides someone through an overwhelming system. And it guides someone, especially at the most vulnerable time of that process. So we found an analogy for that for filmmakers going through a distribution and sales. Also, coincidentally, Ria Tajiri, someone who was my original filmmaking hero, she reached out to me during that time and she gave me a job at nighttime teaching film. It was that time when I was a full-time caregiver was the first time I started teaching about distribution as well. So back to Distribution Advocates, the first 18 months of our existence, our work focused around these pillars: education, advocacy, transparency, dialogue. We publish newsletters, we publish reports, we publish articles. In short, we tried to fill a vacuum of knowledge with data and information. We wanted to counter opaque systems with transparency. And we worked with a lot of you in the room. You were our partners to create access, and we worked in grateful partnership with all of you. So very quickly, we encountered problems in that work. Despite this fire hose of information and education that we worked hard to provide, we confronted something that we did not account for. It was the uninformed consent of filmmakers. In order for this incredibly inequitable system to work, it requires our buy-in. We must buy in order not to create new distribution structures, in order not to create new distribution futures, in order to compete for the same one seat at the table, in order to believe A-list festivals and awards are more important than audiences and distribution. That insecurity is manufactured. Distribution has become the ultimate scarcity mindset. In a country of free markets, film distribution has become one of the least free. In our signature advocacy program, Avril Speaks and I learned that filmmakers of color often reach a film's premiere without an experienced producer on their team. The reason for this is because there are very few experienced producers of color. The reason for that is structural. It is a series of structural problems. It begins with a devaluation of producers premised on a lack of understanding of what producers do. So let me tell you, producers hold a community's distribution knowledge. A community that does not cultivate or support producers is one that will lack knowledge of increasingly opaque systems of distribution. That creates a severe disadvantage in getting independent work to audiences, to impact, and to revenue. That disadvantage has created a chasm of inequity. Creating equity in distribution requires valuing and cultivating diverse producers. So if this is a structural problem, it means that we must address it through collective solutions. In our Substack and audio conversations, we learned that dialogue, tough conversations about problems is the start and the root of collective action. Filmmakers stuck in inequitable systems of distribution must find each other. They must have the space to find each other. And once we find each other, we must share information. We must have the hard conversations that move us to action. This program was led by Abby Sun and Carlos Gutierrez, and it worked hard to do so. We also had a data collection and visualization project that was led by producer Amy Hobby. Amy spent a full year of data collection that put up hard numbers against some of the myths that circulate in our field. We made this data publicly available on our Substack. We presented it with the panel of stakeholders at the last Getting Real. Here, I'm going to just show you a section of slides. This visualizes how many filmmakers try for the Sundance Gate and how many filmmakers get through. So lastly, at the end of our first 18 months, we held a thought leadership retreat, and we looked very closely at the efficacy of our programs, and we looked at their outcomes. This retreat has been crucial. While we have done a lot, while we have accomplished a lot, we came together and we had the hard conversation, were our programs actually moving the needle? What we realized together is that advocacy in a completely broken system only goes so far. So following that 2022 retreat, we made the tough decision to reorganize our work. Perhaps continuing the medical analogy, we learned we were treating the symptoms, but not the cause. So since then, we've identified 3 root causes for our disease systems around which we can organize. The 3 root causes that we've identified is 1, mindset, 2, lack of distribution structures, 3, lack of regulation. So we are now deep into the work of exploring these 3 new programs. To address the first, mindset, we turn to what we know, approaching cultural change through storytelling. We are now working to produce a podcast filled with stories about distribution. Like Fabiana said yesterday, stories change people and people change systems. Filmmakers have been systemically dispossessed from their audiences. They have been told to care more about the tastes and the validation of gatekeepers. If I told an independent filmmaker that they could reach multiple millions of audiences by putting their films through a strategic release online, how many of them would take that over a Sundance premiere? We have so many tools now. Why do we sustain a system that creates and perpetuates privilege, elitism, and racial capitalism? So this was the most common mindset we encountered. It was desire for status above audiences. The second most common mindset was resistance to accepting audience reach as part of the filmmaking journey. And that perhaps can be traced back to film schools, legacy film schools, institutions that celebrate production and exhibition, but almost always do not teach distribution, while saddling their graduates with some of the biggest student debt possible. There is a Wall Street Journal investigation that reports Columbia Film School MFA graduates have the largest debt load of any master's program in the United States. We think storytelling about distribution and about collective action is going to be the best way to move the needle on this much needed mindset shift. The second program is the one meant to address structural change. This program is predicated on the thesis that in a landscape of vertical integration, the solution is to create and sustain many more new, different structures of distribution. Many more new and different. That's what we need. A few of you in the audience are already forging new and different forms of exhibition. That is critical cultural work. I'm interested in the question, how can we create a distribution structure that is based on a collectivist strategy that supports your work? How do we create a structure that further encourages the development of new structures of distribution? The third program is a working group that will research and present policy recommendations around much-needed regulation in our media ecosystem, especially in the laws that govern the separation of production, distribution, and exhibition. So we are asking ourselves, what can distribution advocates do to level the playing field? What would encourage and inspire each of you to apply your creative talents and your skills at collective work in distribution? How can we intervene with collective action in these three activities? How can we intervene collectively in curation and acquisitions? How do we intervene in the delivery and the engagement of exhibitors? How do we intervene collectively in how audiences are drawn to seeing films? So I came with questions. I am here to listen to answers. Because my work as a distributor concerns documentaries that are overly long, too foreign, completely subtitled, and in which they must be released with limited publicity, sometimes no marketing at all, in order to protect the safety of the filmmakers and their families from transnational repression, the very same repression that threatens cultural institutions and film festivals and keeps them from showing these films. Because that is my work, I have, as a distributor, stood at the edge of the margins of a system that did not see these films at all. It is my mandate to find space for these films. It is my mandate to return revenue for these filmmakers. After 15 years of doing this work, it is undeniable. There is space, there is audience, there is revenue. You all are making the space for these films. So I believe that we can and we must build the ecosystem we want from the ground up. In order to thrive, we need an ecosystem of diverse structures. We need many more new and different. We need a multiplicity of creative strategies. More than anything, I believe in your creativity. I believe in the creativity in this room to power collective, structural, and cultural change. So here are some ideas I've been dreaming of. And some of these are good ideas, some of these are not so good ideas. But I want to know, what do you dream of when you dream of a new distribution future? Because what I think about is, what if we could own the means of distribution? What if 1,000 filmmakers got together and put $500 into a pot to own their own distribution company? Could we create a distribution funding system that did not favor the films with the most access and the most resources? What if the filmmakers in this room who have project support also receive support for distribution and sales? What if we created reports of undistributed, underseen films to support their broader circulation? What if we didn't need sales agents? Can we dream up a better middle person? Can we dream up an acquisitions liaison who works to match films with distribution partners? Could we fund a slate of distribution events? I have a lot of ideas and questions because there is so little that has been done in distribution. There are so many things that can be done. So thank you for listening. One of my tenets I take from Grace Lee Boggs, who says conversation is revolution. It's my intention to help set a vibrant debate within Color Congress. The question I leave you with is, what is the cultural future you want to see in 10 to 15 years? What do you dream of when you dream about the films you care about reaching their audiences? Thank you.